You sit at a small corner table in a bustling morning cafe. Rain streaks the window glass. The air smells of roasted beans and damp coats. Your coffee arrives, dark and bitter. Without a second thought, you reach for a small paper packet. You tear the edge. A cascade of fine, white crystals falls into the dark liquid, vanishing in seconds. You lift the cup to your lips. A comforting, familiar sweetness washes over your tongue. It costs you nothing. It is everywhere. You take it completely for granted. But look closer at that dissolving white powder. If you knew the true cost of those crystals, that sip might taste entirely different. For this simple, everyday pleasure, oceans were crossed and maps were redrawn. For this sweetness, kings bankrupted their treasuries, pirate armadas prowled the Caribbean, and millions of human lives were stolen and crushed. This innocent white powder is the architect of the modern world. It is a story of desire, of immense wealth, and of unimaginable cruelty. To understand how we arrived here, you must travel far back in time. It is 8,000 years ago. You're standing in the dense, sweltering rainforests of New Guinea. The air is thick with humidity and the calls of unseen birds. You walk past towering, bamboo-like grass, reaching higher than your head. You draw a stone blade and slice through a thick green stalk. Peeling back the hard exterior, you bite into the fibrous, pale core. A sudden, electric shock of pure sweetness floods your senses. It is unlike anything else in the wild. It is intoxicating. For thousands of years, this tall grass remains a local secret. But seeds and cuttings travel with migrating seafarers, drifting across the ocean currents until they take root in the rich soils of India. Fast forward to the era of the Gupta Empire around the 5th century BCE. You're walking through a vibrant marketplace in the subcontinent. The scent of cardamom and sandalwood hangs heavy in the air. Here, they have learned the magic of transformation. You watch as labourers crush the heavy stalks under wooden presses, extracting a dark, sticky juice. They boil it in massive iron vats over roaring fires until the water evaporates, leaving behind large, golden-brown crystals. They call it kanda. It is a precious medicine, a sacred offering to the gods, an extreme luxury. Slowly the secret spills westward. The armies of Alexander the Great encounter it. Are marvelling at the strange reed that produces honey without bees, but it is the expanding Islamic empires of the 8th century that truly harness its power. You are a merchant in the grand bazaars of Baghdad during the Abbasid Caliphate. You trade in silk, in lapis lazuli, and in this rare, sweet salt. Arab agronomists carry the cane across the Mediterranean, planting it in Cyprus, in Crete, and under the blazing sun of Sicily. They build intricate irrigation channels to feed the thirsty crop. Then, the clash of civilizations brings a new customer. It is the 11th century. You are a weary crusader knight, returning from the blood-soaked sands of the Holy Land. Your armour is rusted, your spirit exhausted, but in your pouch you carry a small, precious block of this foreign sweetness. You bring it home to a dark, damp, and flavourless Europe. Europe tastes it, and Europe is forever changed. An addiction is born. Kings and queens crave it with a madness bordering on hysteria. By the Middle Ages, it is the ultimate symbol of power. You stand in the grand banquet halls of European royalty, watching as master craftsmen unveil towering sculptures, castles, ships, and mythical beasts made entirely of spun and moulded sugar. To consume it is to consume pure wealth, but the demand outpaces the supply. The Mediterranean cannot grow enough. The hunger for sweetness drives men to the edge of the known world. It is the 15th century. You're standing on the deck of a Portuguese caravel, the wind snapping the sails overhead. You are sailing into the uncharted waters of the Atlantic. You discover volcanic islands, Madeira, the Azores, São Tomé. The soil is impossibly rich, the climate perfect for the thirsty, demanding cane. But the cane requires more than just sun and water. It requires blood. It requires endless, back-breaking labour to plant, to harvest, and to boil before the sugar rots. Here, on these remote Atlantic outposts, you witness a dark turning point in human history. The Portuguese realise that to feed Europe's sweet tooth, they need an army of labourers who cannot leave. They turn to the western coast of Africa. The plantation system is born. And then, the world fractures open. In 1493, on his second voyage, Christopher Columbus carries sugarcane cuttings across the Atlantic to the island of Hispaniola. You step off the wooden ships onto the pristine white sands of the Caribbean. It is a paradise, but it is about to be transformed into a green hell. The European powers, Spain, England, France, the Netherlands, realize the New World is a boundless, sun-drenched greenhouse. They carve up the islands, Jamaica, Barbados, Saint-Domingue. The indigenous populations are decimated by disease and forced labour. So the empires look back to Africa. You're standing on a dusty dock in Bristol, or Nantes, or Lisbon. You watch as the infamous triangular trade takes shape. Ships leave Europe loaded with manufactured goods and weapons. You sail down the African coast where those goods are traded for human beings. You endure the Middle Passage, the unimaginable horror of the slave ships, crossing the dark ocean to the Americas. There, human lives are traded for molasses, rum and raw sugar, which flow back to Europe to fund the empires. To be in the Caribbean in the 18th century is to be in the engine room of global wealth. You stand at the edge of a massive plantation in Jamaica. The sun is a relentless hammer. All around you, enslaved men and women swing heavy machetes, hacking through the dense, razor-sharp cane under the crack of a whip. The work never stops. During the harvest, the mills run day and night. You step into the boiling house. The heat is suffocating, pushing past 120 degrees. The air is thick with the sickeningly sweet smell of boiling molasses. Exhausted, malnourished labourers skim the boiling vats. One slip, one moment of fatigue, means a lost limb or an agonising death in the scalding syrup. Life expectancy for an enslaved worker on a sugar estate is counted in mere years. This is the true factory of the 18th century. Long before the cotton mills of Manchester, the sugar plantations are the first modern, industrialised mass production systems. And the wealth they generate is staggering. The sweet white crystals build the modern world. You walk the grand, cobblestone streets of London and Paris, the majestic townhouses, the sprawling estates, the soaring banks. They are built on a foundation of Caribbean sugar. The profits finance the birth of the Industrial Revolution. It completely rewrites human culture. You sit in an 18th century London coffee house. The air is thick with political debate, the clinking of porcelain, and the pouring of bitter tea from the British East India Company. But the tea is made palatable only by the sugar harvested by slaves in the West Indies. Thus do you watch as ordinary factory workers begin to rely on sweet tea and jam on bread. A cheap high-calorie burst of energy that sustains them through brutal, 14-hour shifts in the dark, dangerous mills. Sugar is no longer a luxury for kings. It is the fuel of the working class. But the empires built on this sweetness are brittle. The pressure is too great. It is 1791. You're standing in the lush mountains of Saint-Domingue, the most profitable sugar colony in the world, the jewel of the French Empire. The night sky is suddenly glowing with fire. The plantations are burning. You witness the Haitian Revolution. The enslaved people, pushed beyond human endurance, rise up. They break their chains, defeat the armies of Napoleon Bonaparte, and establish the first free black republic in the world. The sugar empire begins to crack, and to bypass the British blockade and the loss of his Caribbean jewel, Napoleon orders the mass planting of sugar beets across Europe. Suddenly the tropical monopoly is broken. Sugar can be grown in the cold, muddy fields of northern France and Germany. The age of the Caribbean sugar kings slowly fades, though the scars they left on the earth and its people remain deep and permanent. The trade routes shift. The world moves on. But the legacy of that tall, sweet grass has permanently altered the trajectory of humanity. It connected continents in a web of global trade. It funded the rise of naval superpowers. It reshaped our diets, our teeth, and our bodies. It caused the forced migration of over 12 million African souls, fundamentally changing the demographics of the Americas forever. Now come back to the present moment. The cafe is still bustling. The rain still streaks the glass. You look down at your empty coffee cup. You look at the torn, crumpled paper wrapper resting on the saucer. It is so small, so ordinary, so easily forgotten. But you know now that it is not just a sweetener. It is the dust of empires. It is the crystallized sweat and blood of millions. It is the artifact of an age when humanity crossed oceans and traded its soul, all for the fleeting, irresistible rush of a sweet taste on the tongue. Next time you open that little white packet, remember the journey.